And I did that because I like to organize things. I like to organize people. I come from a big Mexican family. There's always lots of people to organize. And I just found that I had a knack for that. So it's no wonder that I fell into program management. I started out my career, my entire career has been in tech, and I started out at a recruiting agency supporting recruiters. And then I moved on to Kingston Technology, which was a memory company, or is, it still is. Went to the Linksys Group, and then spent 14 years at Cisco, where I went through multiple program management roles and management roles in engineering, corporate quality, and then ultimately in talent management. That's when I got really excited about doing diversity work. I got connected with the Latino ERG at Cisco called Conexión. And at that point, I realized that I was ready to do more work in diversity. And that's how I ended up at Facebook, focusing on developing programs to support women, Latinos, and the Black community at Facebook in our infrastructure team. So when I think about infrastructure, it's basically all the cat videos and all the selfies that you're uploading to Facebook, they all go through our data centers, and my group helps support that, that infrastructure team. So I'm super excited to be here and to be joined by three amazing Latinas to talk about how to stand out in the interview process and also just in the Bay Area. It is an extremely competitive environment. I'm sure you all know that. And so you have to be at the top of your game. So what I'm hoping to accomplish today in the session is to give you some tips and tricks, things that you can practice to make sure that you stand out when you're going through that interview process. So I will be joined by three amazing ladies today, and I'm going to turn it over to them in a moment to introduce themselves. Michelle Rodriguez is a senior manager in diversity, inclusion, and belonging at LinkedIn. Jasmine Garcia is a senior technical recruiter at Google. And Ivana Rivera, also known as Ivy, is not only a Latinos in Tech alumni associate, but she's also a systems engineer at Palo Alto Network. So welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for being here. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ivana first to tell us a little bit about yourself in about a minute or two. And I'm also going to challenge each of the ladies as we talk about standing out, we have to get comfortable talking about what we bring to the table. What is our special magic? So I'm going to start, and then I'm going to challenge each of you as you go through your introduction to share what your special magic is and what makes you stand out. So for me, it's, I would say, my resilience. You know, coming from an immigrant family, we've had lots of ups and downs, and being able to get back up, keep going, put that foot in front of the other. I've been told I'm scrappy and resilient, and I have that grit. So that is what makes me special and what makes me stand out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ivana.
So first of all, everybody looks great today. Like it's a Saturday. It's a good day. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the panel here at Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley. So I guess a little bit about me. I am kind of a recent graduate. I went to UC Santa Cruz for 4 years, majored in technology and information management, and I graduated last year, so June 2019, and it was honestly a struggle to find a job, right? Even before COVID, it was a nightmare, kind of. It just honestly, we'll talk about this later, but my tips to stand out, we'll discuss later. I would say the thing that makes me stand out in my superpower is just like not giving up, right? Like just being, my parents are immigrants as well, Beatrice, and they just showed me like, hey, like if you want to succeed in life, you just can't give up. And, you know, I look up to them a lot. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Ivana. And yeah, I do think we all share that resilience, right? To just keep going when things get tough. So thank you for sharing. So let me turn it over to Michelle. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your superpower?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. So I'm Michelle Rodriguez, so excited to be here today with all of you. I always start off talking to people also about the fact that I'm a proud daughter of immigrants. I grew up in the Bay Area from a Mexican father and a strong Salvadoreña for a mother. And I carry a lot of that hard work, that grit, that resilience with me as well. I've also been called scrappy. I feel like that's a theme within the community. And, you know, as I navigate my world now, also family is number one. I'm also a mom, you know, to Galilea and Mateo, my kids. And as I think about my superpower and what is sort of a theme in my career, it's really about how do I make spaces for folks, particularly those that are underrepresented, particularly those that haven't been at the helm of tech. And so every tech company I've worked at, I have the purpose of leaving it better than I found it. And, you know, what is it about me that I'm going to create as a legacy there and leave it? So I sort of get into this pattern of sort of looking around, figuring out, you know, why isn't access here? You know, what do we need to do to overhaul things? And I create something in this like entrepreneurial spirit and leave it, and I'm proud to see it still growing at places that I've left it. So I have this entrepreneurial spirit because I do this within companies, and that is what I say would be my magic.
That's amazing. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing. And we definitely need more Latinos in tech. So thank you for creating those spaces for us. So now we're going to turn it over to Jasmine. Jasmine, can you tell us a little bit about you and about your superpower?
I've been in tech for almost 10 years. I'm born and raised in the Bay Area, alumni of San Jose State University. So really my heart is here in the Bay. I'm very close with my immediate family and spend most of my time with them. I'm currently at Google, so I'm actually on a team that is really focused solely on building representation at Google. And so we have a few pillars that we focus on. And so my focus is building representations with Latinx community across all of our technical roles. And I would say my superpower, I'm going to steal a little bit from Beatriz and Ivana, but I think tenacity and resilience is something that just comes with who we are, and just being unapologetically who you are. Never let your light dim in any room that you're in. We are going to stand out. Tech is not a space that was built for us, but we are making way, and we're going to continue on. See another.
Yeah, awesome, Jasmine. I should have worn my shirt unapologetically Latina today, you know, to really show that pride. So thank you for being here. And actually, I'm going to come right back to you, Jasmine, to just kick off right into the questions. I know that there's a lot of students here that are just really eager to know like how to break in, right? How to break into this space. So as a recruiter and being at Google, it's like one of the companies that I know a lot of people want to get into. So, and now that we're in COVID, all of our interviews are video conference. So what would you say is like 2 or 3 tips that you could share to really make yourself stand out during that interview process on video conference? Can you share with us?
Absolutely. So we are all navigating this new world, right? So I would say don't be fearful of this new territory, because we're all living it and navigating it ourselves. But a few things that should be your key takeaways here is, the first is establish a professional setting. Like, while this is a new world and all things virtual, you're still presenting yourself for the first time with this company. So make sure you choose a setting that is quiet, peaceful, free of any distractions. And if you're having any difficulty finding that space, just make sure you're in front of a clear space or a simple background, so that the focus can be on you. The other thing is testing anything you can. So test your lighting, test your internet connection, disconnect any other tablets, phones, computers, TVs that might slow down that internet connection. Because again, this is your first impression with the company, and you want to make the very best one. Do a test run with your friend. Make sure that they can hear you, that you look good, the lighting is good. And then, of course, dressing appropriately. That is all relative to the company, right? So a financial company might be a little different than a Google. We're a little bit more casual. So do a little bit of research on the company. How do they typically dress in office? And you want to definitely overdress, if anything else. And, of course, appropriate. And then lastly, I would say just don't be shy with your recruiter. Speak up. If you need time to prep, take all that time you need to prep. If you need to split up your interview, split up the interview, but don't be shy. Always speak up. You are your advocate. Your recruiter is your advocate. So be honest with what your expectations are and what you would like out of the process. And then lastly, I'm sorry, one more that is the biggest thing I think out of all of this is connections. Your connections into any company is your biggest door into that company. So attending conferences like these, volunteering, going to meetup groups, being in affiliation with professional groups, these personal connections are really going to get you in the door.
Jasmine, that last one is really powerful for me because I feel like every job I've had, I've known the person or someone kind of connected me or referred me. So absolutely double down on that one. I think that's super important. So so staying on that same topic of like interviewing and kind of standing out, Ivana, I'm going to come to you. You said that you kind of had a bit of a challenge, right, getting through the process. So can you share with me what your interview process was like? And then any tips that you can share with the audience on your interviewing tips.
Interview process for me was kind of, it all happened through connections, right? So I got an email from Lisa saying, hey, like there's a job opening for Palo Alto Networks. We partnered with them with their Latinos like community group within the company called Juntos. And so I reached out to the manager, and that's how it all happened for me. Throughout the interview process, though, I would say like the questions, right? So they were looking for someone with experience, but I had just graduated from college, and the way I tackled that was talking with the manager. We would have one-on-ones almost every time before I had an interview. So just like bonding with the recruiting manager, or like Jasmine said, and just really reaching out to them, establishing a relationship. And the biggest thing I would say is not to just apply, but also reach out. The most common question you're going to get asked too is, tell me about yourself. Like they're going to want to know that. So really, really, perfect how you sound, how you reflect, like record yourself. You can watch yourself and then make any changes. And then they also want to see that you did some research. So they're going to ask, okay, what do you know about the company, and why do you want to work for the company, right? So always do your research. And then right, and then for me, like what I answer to that question is, okay, I really care about the company culture. And with Palo Alto, like they have a great diversity program, right? And they support minorities, right, to go for leadership roles within the company, so you can, climb up the ladder within there. So I really look for that. And then our founder, Nir Zook, he's from Tel Aviv, and he's really just a great, genuine guy, right? So really look out for how the leadership is within the company too, right? And it was cool because at headquarters, you would see the founder walking in the halls sometimes. So it was awesome. Yeah, and any questions, we can discuss them in the breakout room as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Ivana, for sharing. And I wanted to double down on one quick thing that you mentioned, which was your pitch. Tell me about yourself. You never know what to say to that, right? And some of the best advice I got was spend 30 seconds telling people about what you've done in the past, 30 seconds about what you're doing now, and 30 seconds about what you'd like to do in the future. I think that was really nice. I actually wrote it out and I had to memorize it. And you won't remember all the words, but you get the idea. And that was extremely helpful to answer that very ambiguous question. So thank you for mentioning that. Michelle, I'm going to come to you. And you're at LinkedIn, and that is obviously one of the biggest companies that is able, and platforms, to be able to hire and share and network and get to know people. So how is LinkedIn, how are companies and companies like LinkedIn changing their hiring practices with diversity in mind?
I think the industry as a whole is coming to a new pivot point. I think that the emphasis on hiring has been huge. And just to step back a little bit to share my perspective on where it's coming from, I'm a senior manager on the diversity, inclusion, and belonging team at LinkedIn. all my roles for the past 10 years in tech have been related to employee engagement and retention and inclusive cultures. So I'm all about how do we make this workplace better for all. And with my experiences in going through different hiring practices and knowing the industry at this point, you know, people are trying to sort of hack their own systems. We're understanding where the bias is. It's not about if there's bias everywhere, right? We're all humans. We're all interconnected with, you know, the lens that we're coming forward with. And I think it's important for companies to understand what does a diverse slate look like? What are balanced slates? You know, what does it mean to be able to understand a wider talent pool? You know, there's this thing called the like me bias that we've seen sort of play out, not just at LinkedIn, but just tech in general, where we hire what we see in ourselves, you know, and when we think about who's at the leadership helm at the top of these companies, unfortunately, that's not a lot of women of color. That's not a lot of LGBTQ plus folks. That's not a lot of, you know, gender fluid folks, all types of diversity. It's a lot of the same. And so how do we begin looking at how we're changing our systems? So I've seen a lot in diverse slates programs, trying to figure out how do we diversify the people that are interviewing folks as well. I will say, you know, one thing I've also noticed, and this is highlighting something that Jasmine was saying, is that, you know, internal referrals is huge. You know, you have to figure out who do you know at that company. And that can be really hard. We have to figure out within a community, how do we join either Facebook groups, figure out, you know, through your LinkedIn connections, who knows who, right? And just kind of going through those chains of figuring out, you know, who does know somebody at this company where I see this job that I love, and just kind of doing the hard work of finding that connection if possible, because internal referrals is still number one in getting through these jobs. And there are times when folks, you know, reach out to me, they're like, I love LinkedIn, I want to learn more about it. And that's also important too. You know, even if there isn't a job, it's important to start building those networks now, especially as students, especially as early in career folks, because you have to get ready for the job you love, right? And so by creating those networks and creating those synergies in your community, you're able to see a job and be like, oh, I remember I met somebody there, you know, the other day at lunch or for a virtual coffee or whatever. And so I can't emphasize enough the importance of networks and building those up. And I know it's hard when you're a student. And I tell people that's the best time to build your network, because nobody will turn down a student. You know, if a student reaches out to me, that's actually number one. A lot of people reach out to me where they're like, I want an informational interview. I want to get into diversity. I want to get into LinkedIn, la, la, la. I have to prioritize my own time. And I will say when students reach out, particularly students of color, I prioritize that. And so if you're like, I'm learning, I'm building, I'm first gen, these are all things that really stand out to folks like us that are already in, because we want to open those doors for you. The other thing I'll say on this is, you know, our perspective as Latinas is super invaluable right now. Tech needs us. So, you know, I know for a lot of us, we kind of enter these spaces and we're nervous and we're gearing up for these interviews and we're kind of like white knuckling it, like, I hope I do good. And I want to remind you all, they need you so bad. So in these interviews, you're also kind of interviewing them, you know, and if you approach it like a conversation and you're curious about, you know, what does this role mean for career growth? What are you seeing? What keeps you up at night? How would this role really enhance the work that's happening there? You know, be curious, do your research, understand, you know, who's interviewing you, look at their LinkedIn profile. Think in their shoes, you know, why is this person interviewing for this job? You know, what does this job mean for their work? Just, you know, really lean into understanding, empathizing with the interviewers, but also empathizing with yourself of what you want out of a culture. Like Ivana was saying, what is the type of company you want to work for? And that interview will stop being this scary one-sided experience and really be a more rich conversation between the company and you.
Thank you, Michelle, for sharing. And Jasmine, I'd like to come to you in a second because I know you're at Google and that's also another target company and you're as a recruiter. I'd love to hear more about that. But Michelle, I wanted to touch on something that you talked about, and that was reaching out to people and building your network. I mean, full transparency, I think I might have interviewed Michelle with you at one point in our recent career. It is a small world. There is not a lot of us in this space. And so you have, you know, take that opportunity to really connect and stay connected. And one thing also I wanted to mention is, I think at least I, growing up, always felt like, oh, I don't want to bother people. I needed to kind of get over myself and build that confidence. So I would challenge you to kind of really show that courage and get beyond that, oh, they don't have time for me, I'm not important. You just heard Michelle say, you are absolutely important. You're important to me, and I know everyone here on the call today. So just imagine us, being behind you and really cheering for you and wanting to be here and create that space for you. So I would just encourage you to kind of get past that. So Jasmine, I'm going to come to you and ask you as a recruiter, like, what do you see? What would you like to see candidates come in with? How can they prepare better? And then on the opposite side, what have you seen that hasn't worked out so well for people? So it's kind of a two sides to the question.
Absolutely. So first off, I can speak specifically, I hire software engineers for really all of Google. And so we do have a pretty buttoned up process. And so in this situation, technical skills really kind of take the front seat and the driver's seat and how we interview for our technical positions. So I would say just focus on the studies, the coding languages, the technologies that you're really interested in expanding into. We have set domains that we work in, and that's really just based on the products that we build. But building representation is a priority for our company. And so doing the research on the company. We operate a little bit differently than I think other companies do. We oftentimes don't give you the panel slate information. So you are going to go into it blind with the interviewer specifically, but network engineers within the company, network with recruiters. We are kind of the gatekeepers, right, for the companies. And so we do want to build representation here. So doing your research, focusing on the technologies that you want to have a career trajectory in, but also boot camps, hackathons. We are also expanding where we're looking and what kind of experience and education we're looking for. That's part of breaking those barriers and those biases, where we're not going to just focus on UC Berkeley or Stanford anymore. We want to consider all people that are qualified for the role. And then to your question about what hasn't worked, that's a good question. I mean, let's say being too shy. I would say that can be people's biggest barriers when interviewing with people. Do not be afraid to speak up, ask questions. If someone asks you a question and you're not sure about how to answer it, ask clarifying questions. Do not make assumptions, because more often than not, if you make an assumption about what the person's asking you, you are not going to give them the data points that they need to make that decision. If anything, it's just going to be kind of on hold. Ask those questions, speak up. If you don't understand anything, also do the same thing there. And of course, always be yourself. I think that is something that we, of course, as Latinas and people who are an underrepresented community and have been very disenfranchised on so many different levels, we have a tendency to want to fit in, right? And assimilate into kind of the areas that we're in. But you have to go in as yourself, be who you are, and again, be unapologetic for who you are and never let anybody dim your light.
Yeah, I mean, that's so important. I know that sometimes I still struggle, right, to know that my perspective is valued, and to Michelle's point, they need us just as much as we need them, right? So it's important to remember that.
One more thing, because you just actually jotted my memory. So the other thing that I really want to hone in on, and we have trainings on this, but imposter syndrome is a real thing. And many of us, even to your point, Beatriz, we still have it. I can be in this field for 10 years and I'll still be like, wow, they want me to speak? Oh, I'm so honored, you know? We really do have it. And so just knowing your worth and your value and what you bring to the table is your biggest strength.
Thank you for sharing that, Jasmine. So Ivana, I'm going to come back to you, and I know that you were nodding your head like, yes, imposter syndrome is real. Tell me more. What were you thinking when Jasmine said that?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts were going through my head, just like past experiences, like, oh, I'm not good enough to answer that question, but like. You keep it in your head and you don't speak up, but then someone else says the same thing that you were thinking, and you're like, dang, like that could have been me. So just believing in yourself and really it's a struggle for women. And at work, like I'm new to the early in career. This is my first job, right? First corporate job, and sometimes I struggle to just have that confidence, right? So I'm learning. I've been with the company for 7 months now, and I think I'm finally getting a grip. But yeah, I absolutely agree with Jasmine. Like it's very important.
So I'm going to come back to Michelle and ask you, as we talked about like LinkedIn, right? We're talking about standing out, having confidence, being unapologetically yourself. How do you do that on LinkedIn, right? And be authentic to yourself and yet still be like professional, right? To get the job that you want.
This is a good segue to the conversation because I feel like imposter syndrome, for sure, definitely +1, it is real. Research shows us that women of color actually face imposter syndrome at a greater rate than the rest. It's something that everybody feels, everybody, no matter who you are in tech. But it just hits us harder for just multiple reasons. And I want to just emphasize, we always stay learning, just like Jasmine, sometimes I'm like, you want me to do what? Like when I first started getting into leadership roles, I purposefully, and my company paid for this, I purposefully had a coach, an executive coach, work with me solely on imposter syndrome for 8 months. And I'm still working at it. So I will say, always stay learning, develop yourself. It's so important. When it comes to LinkedIn, I will say also it's sort of like your digital brand. It's an extension of who you are. So as a community and as our values as Latinos, I think we grow up in this beautiful spirit of being humildes, being humble, right? And I think it's important for us to understand when to turn that on and when to turn that off. I turn that on when I'm working with partners, when I'm working with my team, humbly just seeking to understand things. When it comes to your brand, we are always really good about, wearing designer brands or wearing a company brand and not thinking anything of it. But when it comes to our own name and our own brand, we get shy. And this is not the place to get shy. On LinkedIn, no matter how you define success, it begins with your profile. You have to wear your brand. There's certain technical things to look into, like there's a button on LinkedIn in your settings. It's a green light, essentially, that allows recruiters to know that you're looking for a job or that you're open to opportunities. Even if you're in a job you love, keep the button open. Just be open to conversations. You never know what doors are going to open to you at what time. The other thing is put a picture on your profile. You are 21 times more likely to have your profile seen with a picture. You get 36 times the amount of messages. So just something to consider. And the other thing is for folks that are students or early in career, sometimes you may be shy to put the work experience that you have down. Put it down. It's about the journey you've traveled. Don't be shy or think, oh, this isn't professional enough. All work experience is relevant. And I will also say, if you have volunteer experience, there's a whole section for that. So if you're like, I have a lot of that, I don't have a lot of professional experience yet, that's still okay. If you put volunteer experience, you're 6 times more likely to have your profile seen. So, I could go on for a day with like LinkedIn stats, but, the whole purpose is fill it out, fill your profile, tell your story. What would you want to tell the recruiter of your dreams at the company of your dreams, right? What would you want to tell the next step? Just put it there because as we all know, world is virtual and digital right now.
Definitely. That is the one representation that we have, right? Is that online presence. So it becomes extremely important even now. So going back to Jasmine about, the pandemic, right? We're just, if someone's looking for a job right now, what tips and advice do you have? Obviously, as Michelle said, leverage your LinkedIn presence, but, what other tips can you share?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, this pandemic is new, right, for all of us. And
Yeah.
even at Google, we're still trying to navigate through, what hiring actually looks like for us. While we're still hiring, it's just changed a little bit. And so when navigating the pandemic and apply. I mean, apply as much as you can to all of the roles that you can. Studies have shown that women tend to not apply for roles if they don't meet every single qualification in that job description, but men will, maybe meet 2 or 3, and they'll apply, interview, and be hired into the role. So do not discount any of the work experience that you have, any volunteer experience that you have. Of course, to Michelle's point, really build up your LinkedIn profiles. I mean, that's really the go-to these days. Just look at profiles and what are people up to. I personally, we are good stewards, right, of the world. And at Google, we do like to consider ourselves, we are building for every single person on this planet. And so I want to see what are the things this person's up to. Do you volunteer? What affiliations are you associated with? Who are you as a person? Not just your professional biography, but also personally, like what's important to you as a person. Being who you are, I think, with your recruiter is just really a good testament to building a good rapport and relationship and communication with that recruiter. The stronger of a relationship that you build with that person, the more of an advocate they are going to be for you. So be who you are, speak up, apply, prepare, always prepare questions for your recruiter, for your interviewers, research the company, any news that might be recent in the media. The other thing is social media does play a role sometimes. I know I don't look at it specifically for my candidates, but anything that's open to the public is fair game. So, you know, I do this with my younger siblings, but, you know, just be careful with what you share and what you post, because it will follow you into your career.
Can I say something on that, Beatrice? I want to just do like my own rule of thumb on that, Jasmine. I always think when I post, you know, I'm a big Instagram fan too, be on LinkedIn. I always think, would I be okay with my boss and my boss's boss seeing this? You know, I share a bunch of stuff personally, but I always sort of have that rule of thumb in the back of my mind. We don't have to share everything. You know, I think this is sort of like obviously a digital age, but everything is your brand in this world. And so I just want to emphasize that, because I know, you know, our new generations, they've always just known posting. They've always just known social media. I think I'm sort of in that older millennial ramp where, you know, we still had the cord phones and the, you know, cassette tapes, right? Like a little bit of analog, a little bit of digital. But yeah, everything is your brand.
Absolutely. Ivana, did you want to add anything to that in terms of branding? What kind of branding did you do as you were going through your job search?
I guess first of all, I have a private Instagram account, so I only select a few people who can follow. But yeah, I would say for me, it was all about my LinkedIn. That is how I got through the gate of just speaking to everybody, right? Like you get messages, hey, like I saw that you're this and that, and like, oh, and then also for informational interviews, I did a few of those, and I looked for people, saw where they went to college, always brought that up, you know, just making connections through that, and that's how they remember you, right? So definitely, you know, look at other people's brands. If you're unaware of what your personal brand is like, you know, maybe, you know, get some ideas of who you think of, who inspires you, and try to, you know, have those same qualities that you really look up to, I would say.
Fantastic. Yeah, and on that note, I know that we didn't really prep for this as for our panels, but I think it's so important, Ivana, what you just said, that there's people out there that you admire, that you kind of see what they're doing. You're like, oh, I like how they present. I like how they, you know, a certain skill that they're exhibiting. And, you know, Michelle, you talked about coaching, which, you know, full transparency here, I've also had a coach that has helped to build my confidence and just really be able to be myself in the workplace. That is very male dominated, right? And sometimes it's kind of hard to find your voice in that space. So I guess the question I have for you all is coaches and mentors and sponsors, like what is their role? What would you recommend for all the folks on the call today? What's the one important thing that you think is important for them to remember for a coach, a sponsor, or a mentor? So I'm going to go to Jasmine first, and then Michelle will come to you.
All right. So to Ivana's point, find someone that you admire. Do you admire their pathway in their career or in their personal life? Maybe it's social justice or racist issues or immigration issues. We are living in a world where so many things kind of blend into each other. And so you definitely want to follow the path of someone that you really do admire and want to follow in their footsteps. And don't be shy about speaking up. Ask for someone to have a coffee chat with you, and no one is going to tell you no. And if anything, people love talking about themselves. So that is like the perfect way into getting to meet somebody and building that rapport and that relationship with that person. To Michelle and Beatriz, I have, I've been in tech for almost 10 years, and I am ashamed to say that I have not had a mentor, and so I need one. But because it's hard. I mean, we are in a space that's not really meant for us or wasn't built for us. And so breaking ground and breaking that glass ceiling has been a challenge. And so being resilient, do not take no for an answer. If someone tries to knock you down, and they probably will, you just get right back up, dust yourself off, and keep it moving. And move on to the next person. But your bosses, leads on other teams, senior members of your team or the groups that you're in, build those relationships, have those conversations with people. I do mentor a lot of people, and it's such a rewarding relationship to be in.
Michelle, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I love this question. I look at it as coaching as something perhaps temporary that you really want to hone in on a skill or something super specific. Some people ask me to be their coach on like their own diversity inclusion journey to like, how do I learn more about, global issues? Can you coach me on like, what are your practices? Things like that. Mentor, like Jasmine, I think it is harder as you go up because there's less and less role models for us that look like us. I will say that. But I also think mentors are really important in the sense of people that know something are really great at something that you're not and will continue being that cheerleader for you. One of my strongest mentors is one of my former bosses from SAP. And she literally taught me how to negotiate. She literally taught me how to talk about, how to get a promotion, how to get more pay, things like that. She's very astute. She's very business minded. And she kind of was in my early career, that person to be like, no, like you're worth a lot. Like, don't be shy, and you kind of need that person to cheerlead you on and always teach you and guide you. And then sponsors, we don't talk enough about. Sponsors are those folks that know your work and will talk about you behind closed doors to make sure you're moving up. And they're super important as you continue to ascend in a company. It's harder and harder to get promoted the more you get up because more decision makers are needed to make this, like, it's not just up to your boss. It starts becoming this thing where the approval for your promotion is your boss and your boss's boss and all their peers. So it becomes kind of greater and greater and greater. And so I always recommend look for the sponsors that are going to be in that room. That's not necessarily your boss, but maybe it's your boss's boss's peer. It's somebody that you bounce ideas off of. They see how creative you are. They see, the work that you're up to, so that when those promotion decisions or any type of decisions are made about your career where you're not there, they're speaking up for you and saying, no, Beatriz is awesome in this. I've seen her grow in A. I can see her leading B, whatever it is. But sponsors, you build over time. It's not like you just tap the door and you're like, hey, Beatriz, will you be my sponsor and like make sure I get promoted? No. This is a long-term relationship where you keep building at it. You're very specific on the asks you have. They know your work. They know who you are over a long period of time.
Yeah, Michelle, it's so funny what you just said. That book, the little children's book, it's called Are You My Mother? And that's what kind of reminds me a little bit about the sponsorship. It's like that's not how you ask. It's a little bit, that requires a little more finesse and sophistication in the way that you do that. So and then something else I wanted to mention, I think, Jasmine, you touched on this in terms of like getting that job and really moving up. And that women tend to wait until they meet 100% of the requirements until they apply for the job. Just a quick story. I didn't do that one time. I went for a job that I knew that I was maybe 40% qualified for. And although it didn't land me a job in the moment, 6 months later, that same manager called me and said, hey, I have the perfect job for you, and you're the person that I want to come and take this on. So even though you might hear no, that's maybe a no right now, but it may be a yes later. So highly encourage you to, again, get rid of that, not get rid, but just kind of overcome that initial lack of confidence and go for it. So with that, I know that we're coming up on time. I see Lisa coming on board. So what I'm going to do is to close this conversation, I just want to say thank you to all of you. And before we close, we're going to do a quick lightning round. So we're going to keep the answers super short, 30 seconds. And the question is, what is the best advice you've ever received and from who? So to close this out, I'm going to go to Ivana first, then Michelle, then Jasmine, so you guys can get prepared for that. So Ivana, I'm coming to you, 30 seconds or less. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received and from who?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a lot of great advice, but I think I'll hone in on just one. So you mentioned this earlier, Beatriz. You said yeah, you can hear no sometimes, right? Someone's going to tell you no. The worst thing that can happen is just someone's going to say no. It might hurt your feelings a little bit, but it's not going to stop you from being your best self, right? Like whether it's a physics class, or just any skill, you're going to struggle, but just believe in yourself, like whether it be at your current job or at school. If you really just put yourself out there and are not afraid to ask questions, the worst thing that can happen is they say no, right? For a promotion, they say no. All right, whatever. I'm just going to keep trying. And, to Michelle's point, you can, right, leverage those people who work around you, and they can speak up for you. They know how you work. They can, be your backbone. And then, right, I don't want to cuss, but if you know your stuff, right, people will see that, and as long as you can show it, you'll get ahead in your career. Absolutely. Like I'm getting ahead, right, studying so much for my career right now in engineering, and it's really paying off. Like you can see that it pays off.
So thank you, Ivana. Okay, going over to Michelle. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received and from who?
A former boss told me, speak up more, your ideas are unique and valuable.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And last but not least, Jasmine.
I had an unofficial mentor, but she was my former boss at my last company. And she was everything I didn't know I needed to see in tech. So a fellow Latina, a little bit older, but she was just my ride or die at work. And just same as Michelle, she just pushed me and really helped me to see my own value and my own worth and what I bring to the table. And then the other is my mom. I cannot go without acknowledging my mom. She is a badass, and she always has been an activist in her day and raised us to be the same way. And ever since day one, she told me, Mija, you are different, you look different, you're going to be treated different. And be prepared. You're going to work harder than everyone else, but don't let anyone get in your way.
Absolutely. Thank you. What a great way to end, Jasmine. Thank you for sharing those words of wisdom. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. Ivana, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. At this point, we're going to close this portion of the conversation, and we're going to transition over to the breakout room.